Hi, my name's Adam. This is Matt. Welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about 3 retirement plan adjustments that our clients kind of push back on, and a lot of you guys push back on a daily basis in comments on YouTube. We thought we'd share them with you guys, why we think they're valuable, why we see day after day, plan after plan, scenario after scenario, why these 3 things work. So we'll go through them. I'm going to ask Matt his feedback. Matt spends a lot of time working on the plans, building out the plans, working with our clients to make sure that they're fine-tuned to meet their short, mid, and long-term goals for retirement. So the very first one is the RRSP Meltdown. So obviously the RRSP Meltdown is a big part of this channel. I talk about it a lot. But Matt, maybe explain the RRSP Meltdown and why it's valuable within the plan.
Yeah, so the key concept of the RRSP Meltdown is basically to start pulling from it as early as possible. And it's typically a large amount right off the start. So we do this kind of just trying to level out that tax bill, withdrawing a good chunk before we start taking CPP and OAS. Just so, again, we're leveling out that tax bill, trying not to have a large amount of tax due later on in life, and ultimately making that estate tax much less so your kids aren't having to pay for that tax bill if, we don't have any liquid assets available to do that.
And again, if we can draw money out, level out your tax bill, and put more money into your TFSA, allow you to gift money to your kids or charity while you're alive, if it creates more income for you, less tax overall, and a better estate, those are kind of the 3 things we look at. And typically the RRSP Meltdown, I would say 99% of the time, we're working on a plan right now where the RRSP Meltdown actually doesn't make sense, which is, again, there's that 1%, and this is one of them. Very unique situation. But for 99% of you, for sure, the RRSP Meltdown is going to make sense. It's going to help you pay less tax, level out that tax bill, which we talked a lot about. So if you're building your own plan or you're working with an advisor, and the RRSP Meltdown, which is, again, drawing down that RRSP as quickly and tax efficiently as possible, if that's not a part of your plan, you're going to want to revisit the plan and look at, does that make sense? Because the chances are it does. So the number 2 kind of plan adjustment that clients push back on a little bit, and I think this probably is the biggest pushback, is delaying CPP. You can take your Canadian pension plan anywhere between age 60 and age 70. And for a lot of you, if you retire early, you default to 60. And I did a plan delivery for a client yesterday, and he's like, Adam, why would I delay CPP if I can start taking it now? Like, that's more income to me now. And I kind of explained to him and actually showed him through the process of, if you take CPP now, we got to take a little bit less out of, say, an RRSP, which creates more of a tax liability down the road. And it just doesn't work. The numbers just don't work. And again, going back to that 99% of the time, it makes sense to defer your CPP somewhere between 65 and 70. Closer to 70 usually makes the most sense. But again, maybe Matt, what's your experience with our clients and people we put plans together for on the CPP?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how some people are very receptive of it, but we often do get a lot of pushback around it. And that's typically just because it's a bit of risk delaying it, and that's simply just, you need to reach the break-even age for those. So, if we're delaying it up to 70, we're assuming you're going to be living past 82. Most retirees, most elderly are living past that age, especially nowadays with healthcare and care homes and all of that. So we honestly do expect most people to live past that age. Obviously, we see a bit of different scenarios when there's health issues or anything like that. But if that ever comes up, we just typically adjust accordingly. But yeah, it can be a big conversation between us and clients, but we definitely see the benefit of delaying it if it's possible and if it does actually benefit you.
And if you can delay your CPP, it gives you a guaranteed government inflation protected pension plan, a bigger one, later in life too. So if you're worried about care facility and just in-home care or whatever it is, to have basically a bulletproof pension plan, for a lot of you who don't have pension plans, your CPP is your main pension plan. So if you can create that amount to be larger and increase with inflation over time, that's also going to help. So it helps on the tax side. It also helps on kind of down the road, giving you that guaranteed income and not worrying about market fluctuations in your 80s and 90s when you really can't afford to have that. And I will say, I'm doing an interview with Doug Ranchi from Dr. Pension. So a lot of you may have been to his website. Maybe you've done a calculation through him. Doug is kind of the expert on CPP in Canada. He's very well known. And we'll have a video out soon with Doug. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have a lot more on CPP. How does it work? Survivor benefit, child rearing, post-retirement benefits, all these things that kind of play into CPP, when to take it, when it makes the most sense for you guys. So we'll have that video up here soon. So the third and final adjustment that we get, again, pushback from clients, or we get requested from clients, and this is more common if you don't have kids, single, no family, maybe, whatever it is. It's, look, Adam and Matt, here's my plan, but I want to make sure that I have $0 the day I die, which obviously is next to impossible, but there's also flaws with that plan. So Matt, maybe go through kind of some scenarios there.
Yeah, so there's a few kind of red flags when creating a plan like this, and simply the biggest one is the predictability of when you're going to die. It is impossible to, because if we want to spend absolutely everything, even within, say, 50,000 of what you have in savings, you've got to think about, you've got your real estate too. Your principal residence is an asset. Are you wanting to draw that down all the way to zero by the time that you're assuming you're going to pass away? Bringing it back to the growing healthcare industry and, the growth we've seen there. Are you going to live past the expected age point that we currently have? That's a big thing. Are you able to live off of CPP and OAS alone because you've spent all of your assets, you've drawn down the value of your home, and now you're just left with the government benefits to basically supplement your entire livelihood? And that will include at that point basically rent, because we've drawn down your home. Will that include any health expenses along the way as well? So there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that are very difficult to put together, simply because are you willing to take on the risk of this not working out for you later down the road? And
big risk.
Do you want to be taking that risk, if you're 90 years old and you're trying to figure out how to pay for next month's rent? So
for clients that are looking to, and a lot of people fall in this position, right? Like, I've built this up, I have a house, I have assets, but I kind of want to like spend everything down, spend my house, maybe rent later in retirement. What are some kind of stopgaps or stress tests maybe to help that out? Like, is it make sure they have X amount later, or like kind of what have we done for our clients that have asked for this?
Yeah, so typically we'll downsize to a certain point, and that typically includes, we'll downsize, and, if you're wanting to move into a rental or care home later in life, we just kind of keep the value of your principal residence in the plan, and that'll be your safety budget, basically. If we get to a point where, you are wanting to, downsize or pass along some assets to your children or whatever earlier on, we've got the value of your home to do that, and we're not left without a safety net, basically.
There's always risks with renting later in life. And a lot of clients ask me this, like, if I want to downsize or sell my house and rent later in life, does that make sense? The concern is always like, if you keep your principal residence, even if you downsize to, a smaller condo, less value principal residence, at least you have that asset there. So if you need care facility, whatever it is, there's still an asset, and it kind of buffers the plan. So if you want to stress test the plan, that's a great way to do it. The other thing is, if you're renting in your 70s, 80s, 90s later on in life, you lose control of where you live, because you can be kicked out of a rental place at any point for any reason, really, at the end of the day. I always tell my clients, look, I don't want you getting kicked out of your rental suite at 85 and having to move on. And, again, if your rental's protected against just, 2% inflation growth every year or whatever, if you get kicked out, and I know like you have a lot of friends right now that are renting, that are in low rents because they've been renting for years. If they get kicked out of their place, rents now are 50, 70, 80% higher. Like, you just rented a new place and the number you're paying is crazy for rent, but that's just the market we're in now, right? So it's the same thing on the other end of the spectrum in retirement. If you get kicked out and have to keep renting because that's what your plan has said, and your rent goes from $1,000 to $2,000 a month, that really derails the plan. So, we don't recommend kind of spending to zero. Have some sort of protection and asset protection there, whether it's your principal residence or just, a buffer of investment in the background. You're going to want to have something to protect yourself.
Yeah, you've got to think about it this way too. If you don't have that protection, who are you going to be a burden to? Because ultimately, you're not going to be able to go through the rest of your life at that point by yourself. You're going to have to rely on people. And is that your children? Are you wanting to put that pressure on them? Obviously, you've been there for them, and they'll hopefully be there for you as well. But, that, again, is that something you want to take on? And is that something you want to put on your children's plate at that point in their lives too?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks so much for joining us in this video. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you have a pushback against one of these three, leave a comment below. And again, if you've had a plan put together and your plan runs to $0, or it doesn't have you delaying CPP or an RRSP meltdown, you might want to rejig that, because we see it day in and day out. We do a lot of plans. There are gaps in your plan if that's the case. So make sure you revisit that with your financial planner. If you don't have a plan put together, you're looking, for help with that, we offer fee-for-service financial planning. You can learn more at parallelwealth.com/planning. Happy to help you out and put a plan together and look at stuff like delaying CPP. We break it down so we show CPP at 60, 65, 70. So it's not just take it here because we believe that makes sense. We actually show you the numbers behind everything. And again, we've shown our software here before where we can actually show you the numbers and compare apples to apples, so that when you make a decision to, say, defer your CPP, you know the numbers behind it. You know why you're doing it and why it makes sense. So again, if you're looking for planning advice, parallelwealth.com/planning. Again, Matt, thanks for joining us in this video, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys.